This is the My Inner Therapist podcast, and I'm your host and empowerment coach, Nikole Seals. This show is dedicated to discovering our innate ability to transform our lives. Think of it as an opportunity to look at your life from a safe distance, from the seat of being your own therapist. In this role, you'll learn to become an observer of your life. It's an effective way to separate our thinking self from our doing self. This way, we can take inventory of our thoughts, beliefs, and stories without judgment, but with awe, humility, and love. It's so easy to get distracted and derailed from our goals, so let this be your refuge from the storm that is life. If you're done with self-help books and programs that disappoint, then I encourage you to take this journey with me. And like any good road trip, you'll need to bring a few things. Come with an open mind, a sense of humor, and the courage to see your truth. I'll be rummaging through my stuff right along with you because we're all a work in progress. The goal is to laugh and learn our way to becoming our own inner therapist, to rewrite our stories and beliefs so they align with the vision of who we want to be. Join in the discussion by sharing your comments and thoughts. And if you're interested in having a free, anonymous coaching session with me here on the show, you can contact me directly at Nikole@myinnertherapist.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. To learn more, visit myinnertherapist.com for access to articles, videos, and my self-help programs. You can also follow me on Instagram at, you guessed it, My Inner Therapist, or subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll find all of these links in the show's description section. All right, enough with the intro. Let the session begin. Hello all, and welcome to today's show. This is Nikole Seals, and we are going to be talking about the powerful skill of reframing our thoughts. I almost feel like I need to be saying that in an Oprah voice. Reframing our thoughts, because it's so powerful and it's life-changing, and it's one of those skills that if you can learn it and do the life application where you apply it to your behaviors, it really will transform the way that you think, thus transforming the way that we behave and how we can change our life circumstances as a result of it. Now, when we talk about reframing is basically a traditional counseling technique. In a therapeutic setting, it would be considered or referred to as cognitive reframing. And what that essentially means is that it's a mental process, right? It's part of our cognition. It's a simple mental process. And what it does is it allows us to shift our perception, right? So we can say you're looking at an ocean and you see the waves and you can see the beach. If you were to then shift your vision to seeing a mountain range and you had tall redwood trees on this mountain, that would be a completely different perception. It would be in a different context. And that is essentially what we're doing when we talk about reframing, is it's really shifting our perception to give new meaning to our experiences. So before we launch into the skill of reframing, we talk about what that looks like, and we go through some examples, and we have a little practice run at reframing. We're going to talk first about framing, because framing is something that we do all the time, and it typically goes unnoticed by us because it's really one of those mental processes that just kind of happen in our subconscious mind. It runs on autopilot, and rarely do we stop to give it attention and thought. But we are gonna do that today, because that's what we do here on this show, is we press the pause button on our lives and we step into the role of observer, and we start looking at our behavior. We start thinking from a self-awareness, a place of self-awareness when it comes to how we talk and feel and think and respond. So when we talk about framing, we want to define it as the mental process whereby we decide the content, the context, the meaning, the appearance, and the value of the experiences, the events, the processes, and even the facts as they show up in our lives. We essentially create meaning to our experiences and the events that we have in our lives. And so to give you some examples of what framing looks like is when you wake up in the morning and you look outside the window and it's raining. You can say to yourself, "Oh, it's raining outside. It looks so dull and dreary. Can't imagine what the traffic is going to be like." And then you can proceed to head into this path of thoughts that will take you to a place of setting yourself up to have a challenging day. When you wake up and you look out the window and you see it's raining, you could frame it from the perspective of, "Oh, we so desperately needed this rain. Everything is going to be so green. And now my plants are getting watered on their own, and I don't have to worry about getting outside this weekend to water them. And I can't wait to get under a blanket when I get home from work and just be cozy in the rain." And then you can set yourself up to actually really enjoy this change in weather. So that's what I mean when I talk about shifting our perception, is it's really just creating a different meaning to the same experience, which, like I said, we do already. We do it all the time. But now we're going to do it with some intention, which is to become the creator of our future moments and our future experiences. And to do that, we need to get a little bit more skillful, right? So one of the ways that we frame our experiences is with our words. Words play a critical role in determining how we frame things. So an example of that would be if, say you had a car accident and you were coming home to tell your husband about being in the car accident. And you say initially you describe it to him as, "Oh, honey, today I got in a little bit of a fender bender." And he was like, "Oh, like how bad was it?" Versus if you come home and you initially describe it to him like, "Oh, honey, I got in a little bit of a crash today." That's a whole different tone that conversation takes on. And really because of the simple word change from using fender bender to using crashed. And that's the power of words. That's the power that they have because they are typically attached to certain emotions and they trigger certain responses. We get a very different response when we hear the word crashed than when we hear fender bender. Fender bender seems like light. It was an accident light. Bumpers just touched, just bumped together. And crash sounds horrific. And we think of movies and we think of the crashes that we see in movies or that we've experienced on the street. So words really do matter, and they are what actually shapes our framing. It's what gives our frame its shape, the words that we use. Another example of that is if you were to go to a friend and tell them, "Hey, you know what? I'm just feeling so bummed. I'm feeling kind of blue right now." Your friend might have a certain reaction versus if you came to your friend and said, "You know what? I'm just feeling depressed." Right? Depressed has much more weight to it. There seems to be some chronicity that comes with being depressed, some severity in symptoms that come with being depressed versus someone just feeling kind of bummed out and feeling blue. So we want to keep that in mind when we talk about framing. We want to recognize that the words that we use is how we actually create the context and create the meaning that we give to the experiences in our lives. So when we frame by using words and phrases, We can choose to have words that are empowering and positive, and we can also choose to use words that have a negative connotation, or we could have a negative tone. And depending on our word choices, we are also going to be automatically associating them with emotions, because there are certain emotions that come with words like being depressed, and there are certain emotions that come when we use words like joyful or peaceful or beautiful rainy day. So when you hear people talk about words matter, this is what they mean. When we talk about the power of words, it's about recognizing that words help us to frame our experiences. They help us to give our experiences meaning. And so in that role of creator and creating our future experiences, we have to take ownership of the words that we choose, because we can choose to use words that have a negative connotation and a negative tone, or we can use words that set a positive frame, that evoke positive emotions. Because when we do get in that rut of using negative terminology and we have a negative tone, we set ourselves up to have negative experiences. You know, if you're into metaphysics at all and you're a person who's drawn to the idea of the law of attraction and how that works, the basis of the law of attraction in books like The Secret is about the power of language. It's based on how we use language to call in our experiences. And so when we talk about reframing, what we're essentially doing is recognizing that the words that we choose have power. And so we just want to step into this role as creator of choosing better words, of reaching for better words and phrases so that we have better experiences, so that the experiences we want to have, right? We're striving for, whether you're looking to improve your relationship, or maybe you have a dream job that you're trying to achieve, or maybe you're in a toxic, unhealthy environment now and you want to be out of that. Maybe you're living in an environment that is not conducive to who you are. It's not in alignment to who you are, and you really want to get out. Maybe you want to see more of the world. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to find where your passion is, and maybe you're still trying to discover your purpose. The way that we go about doing that is really setting up ourselves to have those experiences. And the way that we begin to do that is by becoming the creators through the use of words. So when we talk about reframing, essentially what that process consists of is taking the time to really step outside of ourselves and get in a place where we can be more self-aware. And then we want to identify any type of negative language. We want to identify the negative tone. We want to identify our negative self-talk. And once we do, then we can practice reframing it. And by that, we're going to look at an example of our negative self-talk. We're going to look at the words that might be limiting, or maybe they're setting us up to have experiences of lack, or maybe they're setting us up to keep us stuck in a certain emotional state. We're going to look at those, and then we're going to choose words that will help us to shift our tone and to create a new meaning, to give a whole new context to that experience. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm imagining that some of you are like, what is she? That seems so easy in theory, but on our own, it can be complicated. It can feel, the technique can feel strange and new and uncomfortable, especially for those that this is brand new information and you've never had someone explain the process of framing or reframing to you. This can feel very foreign. And that's why we have these conversations and we talk about these type of techniques and these skills that we can be developing, because new information is really going to be the only thing that helps us to change our circumstances and to change our lives and to change ourselves. And that evolution is going to happen. That evolution may not happen if you choose not to change. But if you are seeking change, if you do want to be the creator of your growth and direct where your life goes, then there are certain skills that we must develop. And reframing is powerful in a way that it does not require a third party. You don't have to become dependent on someone outside of yourself to practice this throughout your lifetime. You may need someone to help you get started. That's what we're here for. That's why we're having this talk right now. But once you learn this skill and you learn how to apply it to your life, it will serve you for the rest of your life. All right, so let's get on with it. Let's move past the difficulties and the challenges of doing this on your own. If you are you really want to be able to learn the skill of reframing, and you feel like you need more information and you want to go deeper, it's always a good idea to have whether you're going to see the therapist or you're working with a coach, to have someone guide you through the process until you feel really, you feel as if it's embedded, it's implanted. You feel comfortable with it. It starts to feel normal as you get into the habit of choosing your words and reframing your thoughts. And like I said, you can take that skill and you can go about your business and teach it to others, right? I have used this technique with clients since I became a social worker, especially during those times where I was working with people who were experiencing crises. If they were in the moment of crises, reframing becomes a powerful tool. It can at times be a life-saving tool. And it was during my years of doing crises intervention and doing crises counseling with families that I became skilled at reframing. And I've been able to teach my clients on how to become skillful themselves. And as a result of that, I've had clients go on to really be the creator of their own change. That's the whole point behind this self-help personal development movement, is not for us to become dependent on external factors and people and other people, but to learn from people so that we can develop our own abilities and skills to be the creator of our own change and to heal ourselves. And so my goal is to help you do that. And I've had it's so amazing to sit and watch your clients transform kind of in front of your eyes. And I've had the experience of being able to see, especially in the moment when a client really gets the practice, right? I had a client who was, this was actually a couples session that had gone on for probably a few months into it. And I had started seeing them separately, and then we would come together for conjoined sessions. And what had become clear to her over those few months is that initially she felt her husband was completely unresponsive, a disconnected partner, just completely emotionally absent from the relationship, and she was frustrated and really kind of on the verge of being done. And through our work, she was able to see how the words that she chose to use to describe him and her relationship were actually resulting in her just having more of the same experiences. And so as she was able to get more comfortable with stepping outside of herself and also to use empathy to get a better understanding about his needs and his behavior, what she was able to realize is that his behavior was the result of feeling as if he could never do anything right by her, that he wasn't really worthy of her because she would tell him. and this really made him shift into a place of just being silent in the relationship and just kind of showing up but not really being very engaged. And it was when she discovered that she was able to start changing. She was able to reframe her perception of their relationship, and also she was able to give new meaning to his behavior. His behavior wasn't because he didn't love her. His behavior was because he felt he didn't feel worthy. His behavior was because he was at a loss of what to do anymore. And once she was able to reframe her own perceptions of her relationship and of her partner, they were able to have conversations where they listened to one another, and they started to remind themselves of the ways in which the relationship was working. And they were able to start seeing more of the positives. And a lot of that was because they were just using more positive language with one another. So they both felt supported. They both started to feel like they were heard. And that right there, just those two things alone can shift somebody's motivation to work harder in a relationship. And this can happen. This can happen in so many different forms, right? And it happens in so many different areas in our lives. We have right now the state of our politics. We see this happening in politics with politicians swaying people by using certain language. We see this happening in race relations. This historically has happened in race relations because we have some very set meanings and contexts and values that we attribute to people based on their presentation, based on their physical presentation, without really getting to know them. And it's once we become empathetic and we start to get to know other people, that we have a genuine interest in getting to know someone, that we see our own meaning becomes reframed. We start to see somebody, rather than seeing somebody as a scary black man, we start to see him as a father of two who teaches, he's the coach to his daughter's soccer team, right? And that shifts your whole idea about the person. And, this happens in our relationship, this happens in our job, but the place where we really want to start is by checking in with ourselves. We want to really focus on the ways in which this is happening internally. And I mentioned before that I've seen how powerful reframing can be for helping people to heal their old wounds, to discover their self-worth rather than looking externally to the world to define their value, and how it helps people to take back control of their lives. And really, this is the core reason behind my work of creating self-help tools to teach people this really simple, effective way of doing work on their own without having to be dependent on someone else. So if you go to my self-help tools page on my website at My Inner Therapist, you'll see that I have programs there that are based on reframing, just the simple act of reframing. And so they're about the self-talk reboots, is what they're called, by the way. And so these self-talk reboots essentially help us reboot the way that we talk to ourselves. It's that simple. And they're practical guides on how you go from identifying to reframing. And for me, when it comes to learning a new skill, I try to do it in a way that's because everybody's different learner. So I've got video flashcards for those of you who are visual learners, and I've got these great audios for those of you who really want to be able to listen and learn, but then that you can also be mobile. So you can do it in your car. You can listen while you're at work, if that's acceptable. You can listen while you're cooking or just running errands, or whether you're exercising. You can even listen to it while you sleep, and you could subconsciously learn. But these self-talk reboots are step-by-step instructions on how to reframe your negative self-talk. And I give examples. So we start out with some basic examples of what negative self-talk looks like. And you'd be surprised. There's some really common phrases that all of us that tend to creep into all of our internal dialogue. So I really start off with those common forms of negative self-talk, and then we just practice reframing them until you get really comfortable with it. Some examples would be taking the common commentary that I'm fat. I hear so many women in sessions will just break themselves down and say the most negative things about themselves, and they'll make statements like I'm fat. And so what we want to do when we reframe a sentence like that is we want to reframe it in a way that is not so much a positive affirmation where we're saying I'm beautiful, which you could be, you could very well be, you could feel that, and that's great, but not everybody does. And that's sometimes a hard leap for somebody to make, to go from saying I'm fat to I'm beautiful, because what happens is they don't believe it. Their body doesn't believe it, and their mind doesn't believe it. And that's a much harder job, is to convince the mind and body of a statement that it doesn't buy into, because everything else in your body is telling it something different. The emotion of depression, of repulsion, of shame, of guilt, all of that still lives in you. So when you're saying I'm beautiful, it feels a little bit like you're lying. And that's the challenge of positive affirmations, because sometimes they take you to a meaning that you can't yet buy into. So with my reframing, it really is about just shifting the sentence so that it's still believable, but that it's empowering. It puts you in a place of either being empowered or in the process of doing something different, because you're still in that creative role. That's what we just want to maintain, is putting you back in control and really taking ownership. So when we look at the statement I'm fat, what we could reframe that into is my body is changing. Because there's nothing untrue about that. Your body is changing. And what that does is it leaves open unlimited possibilities about what that means. You still are in the role of creators, so that you get to choose what that means to you on a daily basis. We could baby step our way from I'm fat to the place of my body is changing, to the place of I feel so much more comfortable in this body, or that I love the changes I see in this body, or I love the shape of my body. As you progress, as your thoughts bring in a different experience for you, and that those experiences progress to a place of where you feel more satisfaction and comfort, your words will change, as they should. And that's the evolution of it, right? Let's do another one. I'm unlovable. It's another common one that I hear quite often in my work. And when we think about the statement, I'm lovable, what we can do is we can reframe that to I'm lovable because I'm loving. And what we're essentially saying is that I love myself, which makes me lovable to other people. Another way that we could reframe that is to say, when I love myself, people can't help but to love me too. And think about that. Think about how powerful that is. And that's the act of love. When we love ourselves, people feel that energy. They also see the love that you have for yourself, and people automatically buy into the idea that you're lovable. She must be lovable because look what she does for herself. Look how she takes care of herself. Look how she feels about herself. Listen to how she talks about herself. She must be a lovable person. I'd be in the wrong for not falling in love with her. You can have a statement like, I'm scared. And just to shift yourself out of that, to move your perception from being scared, you can simply reframe it to, I'm changing. Because I'm changing allows so many other possibilities for you. And then you get to decide what those possibilities are. Let's take the statement, I must be perfect. Really common, especially common for a lot of women who feel like they need to meet this society standard of what perfect looks like. And so we tell ourselves, I must be perfect. And that sets us up to be so disappointed and frustrated and and to try to achieve a level of perfection that doesn't exist. And it's so self-harming to set ourselves up that way. So why not take a statement like that and reframe it into imperfection makes me relatable? Right? So believable. So believable. I can buy into the idea that imperfection makes me relatable. Right? If I'm meeting someone else and they're like, yeah, I can be, I don't have it together. I'm a work in progress. I'm trying to make this happen. I can relate to that. I feel closer to that person as a result of being able to relate to their experience. So saying imperfection makes me relatable, I just take ownership of my imperfection and I'm accepting it. There's no internal strife because I've set myself up to accept it and be okay with it. So those are some of the examples of what reframing looks like and how it can shift your emotions, and also too how it just puts you back in control. It really does give you back your power. Now, if you want to learn more about reframing, because there's so much that you can do with it, and like I said, it's applicable to all areas of our lives. This is a very powerful tool that we should be teaching in schools. I have no idea why we aren't, but I am teaching it here, and I am teaching it in my self-help tools at the website. So be sure to go to myinnertherapist.com, and there's a blog post there on the under articles as well that you can look at, and it gives you a little bit more detail about reframing. And then also be sure to go to the self-help tools page where you can look at the different products there, and then also just learn more. Click on the view product buttons and just learn more about how they work and what they will specifically help you to do. Okay, that's a wrap. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Remember, your goals aren't achieved in the future. They are realized in the choices you make moment to moment. Until next time, friends.